Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left. Because my children are coming.
Never say never to always.
There'd be none of you
Say
left.
always to none. To seem is to dream a dream.
Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people when I would have felt better. And when I felt like I really offered society something. You know, if I wanted to kill somebody, I'd take this book and beat you to death with it, and I wouldn't feel a thing. It'd be just like walking to the drugstore.
It's time to call time from behind you.
There'd be none of you
It
left.
has been just a dream. Valley of death and I find you.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, welcome everybody to
Charlie
Charlie Manson's Fanny Pack. I hope that made you vomit a little bit. That was great.
Yep,
We're getting better every week at that.
I know. Isn't it fantastic?
Yeah.
So, before we get into our stuff, I have a question for you as I play with my Sudoku game. My question for you is, and I believe I had asked you this question when we had first started dating. And I want to know if it's changed, because mine's kind of changed a little bit. So, my question for you, my good sir, is what, I'm bumping it up to 4 things. What 4 things need to be left at your altar as a god?
Let's see.
Because I did 3.
Weed, ramen,
Okay.
coffee,
Yeah.
and
See, it could be a lot of things for you. Like, it could be knowledge. It could be.
I was gonna say like a library card, maybe.
See, I was on point though with knowledge.
Yeah, I was sitting there thinking maybe a library card.
I know you so well.
Well, what are your things?
I asked this question and I didn't think it all the way through. So.
Boy, some icebreaker this turned out to be.
Well, now I have to think. So now I gotta do the who's or what's it's.
The who's or what's it's.
Yes. Definitely I have to agree with you with weed. But I'm gonna take another step forward and psilocybin and acid have to be left there too. Those go hand in hand for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Definitely like good pastries, I think. like good chocolates, good pastries, like decadence. That's the idea. We're going for decadence. That could be taken many ways. Decadence. And
Oh, you hear that impressive motorcycle?
Oh, yeah. My dick is this big.
Well, I mean, you know, the co-host of Stoner's Point drives a motorcycle, but, you know, I never hear it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
he drives a stealth cycle.
But my 4th thing would definitely have to be like video games.
Okay.
Because.
Oh, see, video, that's too broad, though. Because, see, I could have just said books, but no, That's why I
You
said
like
library card.
library cards. So what would have to be left to me is your winning scores.
Yo,
Your high
yeah,
scores in games.
Print out some screenshots of high scores.
High
That'd be
scores
kinda
and
cool.
leave them as offerings to get higher scores, and just it keeps rolling.
Well,
Yeah.
today we are beginning our discussion series on occultism.
I'm so stoked.
Yeah. Now, of course, this is going to be broken up. We're going to do an episode of occultism, and then we're going to do the DeFeo family.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do another episode of occultism, and then we'll do something else.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
I figured the best place to start is with an explanation of what occultism is, the occult in general. A lot of people like use it like, oh, that's the occult, and this is the occult, and that is cursed. This is cursed.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about this. I'm just fascinated with the subject, so I don't know much.
Whereas
But
me,
it's a fairly recent
I
thing
began
for me.
to abandon my Southern Baptist Christian upbringing at an early age, around 11 or 12. And occultism, the occult, is immediately what I started looking for. So I've studied the occult. I studied it like intensely for about 10 years maybe.
Yeah.
And then since then I figured I kind of reached where I wanted to go. I've seen what I needed to see from it.
Yeah.
And that, but it's a super interesting topic. It's really like a lot of what I got into with like Thelema and fucking stuff like that. That it's really like almost like, remember like in Beetlejuice where the handbook for the recently deceased read like radio instructions.
Yes.
Almost every one of Aleister Crowley's books read like that. Along with many other things like the Enochian Keys and the Order of the
Don't you have
Rosy
some of
Cross.
those books?
Yeah, I got a few books. I got a few.
Yeah.
Got some. But yeah, so the occult in the broadest sense of the term is a category of esoteric supernatural beliefs, and esotericism and esoterics is basically kind of like loosely related ideas and movements that developed along within Western society that have like bits and pieces of old paganism and mixes of like Judeo-Christianity and Judaism.
Okay.
But
and yet, like, because with like Christianity and stuff, like they're like, no, we are.
Well, we'll get to where Christianity falls into this. It definitely changes things. But yeah, beliefs and practices which generally fall outside the scope of religion and science, encompassing phenomena involving otherworldly agency, such as magic, mysticism, varied spells. Can also refer to supernatural ideas like extrasensory perception, parapsychology, ghosts, demons. The occult science term was first used in 16th century Europe to refer to astrology, alchemy, and natural magic, which are all today like,
Yeah, it's
pseudoscience.
still under the
It's pseudoscience.
the umbrella still, yeah.
And it's evolved since then. It reached its high point in like the late 1800s with such figures as Helena Blavatsky.
Who is that?
HPB?
I recognize that name. Why do I recognize that name?
Madame Blavatsky.
Oh, that's why.
Oh.
I kind of, but I need like a recap.
Yeah, Madame Blavatsky, she started her own kind of religious society called the Theosophical Society. And she basically gave the Nazis their core belief system, right?
That's
she
why,
gave
because
them
we talked about
she
Nazis.
gave them this idea of like these superhuman beings. She believed that somewhere off the coast of California was this mountain that was occupied by Lemurians.
What the heck?
Yeah, they're like
She
she took the name Lemurians from Gulliver's Travels.
No shit.
Yeah, and but she basically is like this ancient advanced society similar to Atlantis that all lives inside this old like ancient mountain, like Mount Shasta in California. I think, is where a lot of her modern day believers think that this place is.
Hmm.
Nobody's found it yet, and Mount Shasta's
No one's
pretty
for
occupied.
sure.
But it's also why in GTA 5, there's a mountain in GTA that's supposed to be like Mount Shasta, where you can go and see, like, there's all kinds of weird shit. You can go to Mount Shasta at a certain time, you see UFOs, and
I
shit
like
like
UFOs.
that. Like,
I think they're fascinating.
and that's why. Also, another like big name that I recognized immediately that involved in not with her theosophy, but in this era of the golden age of occultism was Eliphas Levi.
Bless you.
Eliphas Levi is the man who gives us the depiction of Baphomet. Yeah.
I can't, and we still can't find that portrait that
I
got
know,
you,
and I am
that's
so
really
sad.
upsetting.
I got rid of I left the statue behind on purpose, but I didn't want to leave behind the picture. And I don't know where
I got
it
you
is.
that for Christmas.
I know, I'm so sad. But so Eliphas Levi, Helena Blavatsky, and later Israel Regardie and Aleister Crowley. These are all like huge names in this movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess to really understand, if you want to understand it, we got to take it back to the two earliest things that were considered occult, and that gives us Kabbalah and Gnosticism.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Kabbalah is basically like it's basically like the magic version of Judaism.
But Jews are magical. They're magical, mystical human beings. They have latkes and they're delicious.
And dreidels are cool as fuck.
Yes, they are.
Dreidel,
Actually,
dreidel,
like all the
dreidel.
Jews I know are super chill, super cool.
I've only known a couple, and it wasn't a
I've
big
known a
part.
good amount.
None of them were like like hardcore. None of them were wearing
Yeah.
yarmulkes. You know what I'm saying?
No, they
So-
were, I guess, socially practicing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But Kabbalah is Hebrew for tradition. It's a discipline and school of thought in Jewish mysticism. The definition kind of varies according to the tradition and the aims of those following it. From its origin in medieval Judaism to later adaptations in Western Esotericism, Christian Kabbalah, and Hermetic Kabbalah. And Hermetic Kabbalah is going to come into play when we start talking about.
I was about to say, I had no idea there were multiple.
Oh yeah.
There. Oh, what have I gotten myself?
Well, you've heard of the Golden Dawn, right? The
Yeah.
Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
Well, that was based heavily in Hermetic Kabbalah.
And not just what?
Yeah. Kabbalah is it's a teachings that are meant to explain the relationship between an unchanging eternal God that they call Ein Sof, which is basically means
Heil?
which basically means the infinite. God, I might have to edit that out. Ugh. In the mortal finite universe, which is God's creation, it forms a foundation of like interpretations within Judaism of how it went along. So they basically believe that there's this God that you can't even fathom the concept of, right?
Yeah.
Just the infinite, all is, am that is. And in order to create the world, he creates kind of like a puppet. He an avatar, if you will, and that is named Elohim, which is where they get Yahweh and the whatnot.
Yeah.
And now this
recognize that.
forming of the God, what they call the Godhead, the two together, becomes the Tetragrammaton, which breaks down to a 72-letter word for God.
God bless you.
Tetragrammaton.
It sounds like you're saying pterodactyl.
Yeah. And, well, I mean. Oh God, I wish I had pterodactyl mic.
I almost spat out my coffee.
If you don't know who pterodactyl Mike is, become a patron of Necronomicon.
Yeah.
And you will learn all about fucking pterodactyl Mike.
And Bible Babble with Dave. It's great.
Bible Babble with Dave is one of my favorite podcasts of all time.
It really was.
I kind of want to do my own version of Bible Babble with Dave.
I mean,
I've actually thought about reaching out to the boys and saying, hey, look, I plan on doing something similar. I don't want to step on your toes.
Is it okay? I will give you credit.
But yeah, so they already have like a super complex, layered idea of just what God and existence is.
Okay.
And everything that in their religion is basically like formulas for trying to come closer to an understanding of their infinite God.
Which is what people do, I guess, generally. Like, that's what people are just doing. They're like, yeah, I just want to understand God better.
Yeah.
But you got to do it my way. You got to remember that. You got to do it my way.
Yeah. Now, they believe that there's an inner meaning of the Hebrew Bible and traditional rabbinic literature, and that there's like inside this hidden meaning, you have to find the hidden meanings and the clear meanings, and
Are
putting the
we
two
in
together.
like high school with literature? Like, there's more.
You wanted to talk about the occult?
Yes, but is there more to just Johnny's wearing a blue shirt?
Oh,
Why?
yes. Why is Johnny wearing that blue shirt? What does blue mean? And if you take each one of these letters of the sentence Johnny's wearing a blue shirt and apply those letters a numerical value, what is the mathematic significance of those numbers that come out of that equation?
Yeah.
That is the occult.
Got it. Understood. I do enjoy taking apart stuff. It is fun.
Traditional practitioners of Kabbalah believe that the earliest origins predate all world religions and are the primordial blueprint for all of creation's philosophies, religion, science, arts, and political systems. Historically, they actually emerged from earlier forms of Jewish mysticism in 12th and 13th century Spain and southern France.
The 12th century?
Yeah, that would be the 1100s.
So... Damn, what was going on in the 12th century?
Let's
see. 12th century. I got a Google machine. 12th century. Boop. Some events in the 12th century.
That's cool.
Let us see. Something cool. I don't see any. Ooh. The Knights Templar founded and protected Christian pilgrimage in Jerusalem in 1119.
Okay, so now you're seeing what time frame it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, the Templar are going to come in heavily later on. Maybe not in this episode, but definitely when we get into...
David the First is crowned King of the Scots in 1124. I'm just piping in with little fun little tidbits. Ooh, in 1130 to 1180, there was a 50-year drought in the American Southwest.
Hell yeah! Well,
wow.
Good thing nobody was living here.
I know. Good thing.
Yeah, Columbus hadn't discovered it for the first time ever yet. Yeah, it didn't exist.
It was just
fake news.
Yeah.
It was just India then.
Goodness gracious.
So there's a few steps that they kind of go through. Overall, what they're trying to do, each practitioner is trying to achieve a mystical union with God, or become kind of a mediator in God's active intellect, which basically means you're a brain cell in God's brain.
So I guess comparatively looking at it, it's like with us watching The Crown right now, it's kind of like that where the queen is the sovereign, she's holding up the church or whatever. Is it something like that?
Honestly,
or am I paralleling it?
Yeah, you're paralleling it a little bit off on that because it's not you don't become you're not an individual representative. You become part of the whole of God, right?
We are Borg.
Kind of. Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Hive mindset. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're overall you become a brain cell, a mouthpiece for God.
You become a Borg. Okay.
Yeah. Your extra processing power. But yeah, so according to the Kabbalistic belief, the early Kabbalistic knowledge was transmitted orally by patriarchs, prophets, and sages, and was eventually kind of woven into Jewish religious writings and culture. Um, According to this view, early Kabbalah around the 10th century BCE, which puts you around 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. So that had been 12,000 years ago. They say it was being practiced by over 1 million people in ancient Israel, which this we now know is nonsense. About 12,000 years ago, we were mostly a hunter-gatherer peoples.
Yeah.
And there was an ice age going on.
Yeah. So tweak that number.
Yeah. But there are several different schools of thought with very different outlooks. All of them, though, are accepted as correct, which is kind of unique. Authorities kind of that in the Kabbalic Church have kind of narrowed the scope and diversity by restricting study to certain texts, notably the Zohar and the teachings of Isaac Luria.
Okay, question. What makes them accepted text versus like the other ones? I don't know what the other texts
they're
are.
not outlining any text, but what they're doing is regimenting it. This particular group of Kabbalist practitioners follow these books.
I thought you said cobbler.
Cobbler.
Like cobblers. I'm like, huh?
Like little leprechauns.
Oh, jeez.
So and they separate it out like that so that each one can specialize and get further study by restricting the number of books that this particular frame of thought is studying.
Okay.
They're not saying this book is okay and this book is not. It's like, no, these books pertain to this particular school of thought. Y'all need to study that. Do all the maths and shit with that.
And if you want to study it all, you have to. It's going to be a long road.
And so from the Renaissance onwards, Jewish Kabbalah texts entered non-Jewish culture. This is when they began to get studied and translated by Christians and Hermetic occultists. The syncretic traditions of Christian Kabbalah and Hermetic Kabbalah developed independently of Judaic Kabbalah. Reading the Jewish text as a universalist ancient wisdom preserved from Gnostic traditions of antiquity. Which gives us a jump-off point to start talking about what Gnosticism is. Okay? We'll go into Gnosticism, then we're going to jump back into Kabbalah. All right?
Okay. So, tell me, what is Gnosticism?
Gnosticism, from the ancient Greek gnostos, meaning having knowledge, is a collection of religious ideas and systems which came together in the late 1st century AD among Jewish and early Christian sects. They emphasize personal spiritual knowledge, or gnosis, above orthodox teachings, traditions, and authority of religious institutions. Gnostic, their deities generally presents a distinction between a supreme hidden god and a malevolent lesser divinity, sometimes associated with Yahweh of the Old Testament.
Okay.
So they have this idea that there is a good God, a supreme God, and then that the God of the Old Testament is this malevolent lesser God who is responsible for creating the material universe. All right. So Gnosticism believes that before, in the beginning with Gnosticism, there was basically chaos. Right.
Yes.
There was no order. There was no creation. There was no form to anything. Everything that is and ever would be existed.
Your mic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, everything that ever was or would be existed in kind of like this cosmic soup of everything.
Cosmic soup? What's in cosmic soup?
Nothing.
It's delicious?
Even the Bible says, "And the world was without form and void, and darkness walked upon the faces of the deep." Well, this is where they kind of get that from. They believe that the original God created this without form and this voidless, formless world, the creation, and then that Yahweh came in and put order to the chaos.
Yahweh was like, nah, man, we're going to go.
Right. And now this is important for a later discussion we're going to have on Gnostic Satanism.
Ooh, that's going to be fun.
And anti-cosmic religion, which basically sought to turn Yahweh's work on its head and put everything back into the soup.
I like soup.
I like
We're
soup,
having
too.
chili tonight. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it should be in there on low right now.
It's gonna be so good.
Consequently, Gnostics considered material existence to be flawed or evil, and held that the principal element of salvation to be direct knowledge of this hidden divinity, attained via mystical or esoteric insight. Many Gnostic texts do not deal in concepts of sin or repentance, but with illusion and enlightenment.
So they just nix this whole like sin kind of idea,
Yeah,
and
in
they're
fact,
just like, you're working towards
funny
being more
story,
enlightened.
Jesus was one of the Essene.
What does that mean?
They were a group of Jewish Gnostics. So Gnosticism, like Jesus was a Gnostic. He preached a Gnostic gospel.
Okay.
And later Christians and whatnot like altered it a bit. There's actually quite a bit of Gnostic books of the Bible that didn't get put in.
Yeah, I know some of the quote unquote lost books of the Bible or whatever, and I know that just because man is man,
No.
things will get lost
In fact,
translation.
we
and stuff.
have at our fingertips, at a doorway, a fairly knowledgeable expert in like Gnosticism and the Essenes, and maybe like we'll get David in here on another episode to talk about it, because he actually knows quite a bit more about the Essenes and the Gnosticism of Jesus than I do.
Oh, I had no idea.
Like yeah, if David would be religious, I think he is kind of a Gnostic Christian.
Okay.
And actually, I have no qualms with it. Like I said, they're not so much about control, but enlightenment and doing away with illusions, seeing for things as for how they were.
So, just looking at it from that perspective and putting it into like, I guess our generation stuff, there would still be a lot of us who would identify probably as like Gnostic Christians in a way.
If honestly Christianity had remained as Gnosticism, I have no quarrels with it.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's about seeking knowledge and truth,
and not being like this is the only way. So if it didn't go, left and kind of stayed on this kind of knowledgey path, it would have.
Well, if it had stayed left, not gone on this.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah, Gnosticism is kind of the left wing of Christianity and religion
I'm looking at
in general.
That is
religion in general.
That's the path it was on, and then we're just like, it has to be this.
Gnostic writings flourished among early Christian groups in the Mediterranean world around the 2nd century, when fathers of the early church denounced them as heresy. They went around trying to destroy them. Very little of Gnostic gospels have been left behind. But there has been some. For instance, there are like the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocrypha of John, the Book of Judas. There's a lot of like Gnostic Gospels that got kind of mostly destroyed.
Yeah, that people don't look at as.
Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls is one of these Gnostic texts.
Okay.
Early Gnostic teachers saw themselves kind of aligned with Christianity at the time. In Gnostic Christian tradition, Christ is seen as a divine being which is taking human form in order to lead humanity back to recognition of its own divine nature. But there's no single standardized system of beliefs within Gnosticism. And the emphasis on direct experience allows for a wide variety of teachings, including currents far out as Sethianism, which like
what?
The Egyptian god Set.
Yeah.
In Persian Empire, Gnostic ideas spread as far as China. That
makes sense.
Yeah. And one of the only 2 surviving Gnostic religions from antiquity can be found in Iraq.
Yeah, does it have the names or
Mandaism, Mandaeism, Mandaism.
It sounded like a spelling bee.
It does.
Okay.
And the early Mandaeans may have been the first to formulate what would go on to become known as Gnosticism within the early Jesus movement. Most of it, the only knowledge we had was the anti-heretical writings of Orthodox Christian figures. Then there was a renewed interest in Gnosticism after the 1945 discovery of Egypt's Nag Hammadi library. which is a collection of rare early Christian and Gnostic texts, which include the Gospel of Thomas and the Apocryphas of John. There is several sources that go back to Zoroastrianism, Hellenistic Judaism, and Platoism, Platonism, basically like a religion based on the works of Plato.
Yeah.
Since the 1990s, the category of Gnosticism has become increasingly scrutinized by scholars. One such issue is whether Gnosticism ought to be considered one form of early Christianity, or an interreligious phenomenon, or an independent religion. So
it's just they look at it as pish posh.
Yeah, the pro-Orthodox Christian groups consider Gnosticism a heresy of Christianity, but modern scholars believe that the theology's origin is more closely related to Jewish sects and Christian sects of like Kabbalah and what have you. Some debate that Gnosticism origins have roots in Buddhism, and that's a cool story. One day,
I'm about to say that.
So Jesus, there's a missing part of Jesus' life in the Bible.
Okay.
At 12, he is seen in the temple, like discussing and debating religion with the elders.
Yeah.
And then he disappears and reappears at 33 when he gets baptized by John.
Yeah.
John, who was an Essene. So he in those like 20 something years, where was he?
Yeah.
And some of the theories that he went to Egypt. Some theories say, and my favorite theory is that he went and saw someone who was teaching Buddhism. You know, I mean, he was right after Siddhartha Gautama founded Buddhism, and it would have been after Gautama's death or whatnot. But Buddhism was still in its early and purest days.
Yeah.
So
Sidebar, that's a great book.
What, Siddhartha?
Yeah.
By
I can't remember who it's by.
Herman Hesse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually a really good book. And it
is.
was based loosely on Siddhartha Gautama.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I had to analyze it in like 10th grade.
Many of the Nag Hammadi texts and any other really Gnostic texts that we have found have a violent rejection of the Jewish God. Right? And I'm with them there, because the Jewish God in the Bible, you got to think, the plagues of Egypt, the fucking flood.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was a very...
Job. The Jewish God is a fucking piece of shit.
The Jewish God is very...
Yahweh sucks fucking donkey cocks. If you're going to choose a God, there's more evil God. There's not many more evil gods you could choose.
Yeah.
He is horrible.
And that always was a question for me, just growing up, being like, well, you want me to believe about this God in the New Testament? Okay, but what about this God in the Old Testament? Are they not the same?
They can't be, right?
Are they the same? What's happening?
Yeah, and Kabbalah and Gnosticism came about, like, because you can see in Kabbalah that ultimate God that you can't understand working through Yahweh as like a puppet, right? And that's where Gnosticism kind of takes its cues. Like, there is a greater primordial God, but then there's this piece of shit.
There's this one asshole that was just like, I am indeed the boss. No, sir. You can step off. Or whatever being step off. It's fine. They can handle it.
And with early Christianity, some of the teachings of Paul and John might have been a starting point for Gnostic ideas, with a growing emphasis on opposition between flesh and spirit, the value of charisma, and the disqualification of Jewish law because it come from a fucking tyrant.
Like that, just stuff like that. Like I struggled very hardly. I struggled very. I can't word. I have word soup.
At this time, there's a place in Egypt called Alexandria, and there is a library in Alexandria that contained, and we lost it thanks to war with Rome, but it contained like every text that Egypt and Rome and Greece had gone across the world and gotten their hands on. Yeah. This is an ultimate collection of every religion, every mythology, more than likely instructions on how they built the goddamn pyramids. I mean, all of like our early history was lost in the fire of the Library of Alexandria.
And that was just
Right.
devastating.
Well, now,
was just
Right.
devastating.
Well, now Alexandria was a place that a lot of these like religious minds would come and study. You had religious minds coming from all the different Kabbalistic traditions. You had Gnosticism. They think may have actually been born in Alexandria.
Oh.
Um, the Christian idea of of the church and whatnot. It was of Jewish and Christian origin. But Alexandria, like because there was a Christian movement there, it attracted Greek members. Various strands of thought were available, such as Judaic apocalypticism, speculation on divine wisdom, Greek philosophy, Kabbalah. I mean, so much came out of Alexandria.
And I guess the willingness to listen and debate and talk came out of Alexandria with stuff like that. People sharing all of that knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. Gnostics tend to lean towards kind of like asceticism, like kind of monkish, right?
Yeah.
Kind of isolation and whatnot. They were less rigorously like concerned with morality so much. Took a more moderate approach to correct behavior. Gnosticism believed, whereas like Christianity, you do this because of this. Whereas Gnosticism, it was kind of it was what is your motivation, right?
Yeah.
It come down to matters of the heart. Ritualistic behavior was not important unless it was based on a personal internal motivation, and that's something that's going to come up again and again, especially with me. It's kind of why I view ritualism the way I do. I'll say that again. Ritualistic behavior is not important unless based on a personal internal motivation.
So here's my question: how do you view it then?
It serves no purpose except for your own. Even if there are gods and whatnot, they really can't care about all these, like making sure you go through all the right steps and reading all the right things. And we're gonna come back into this at the end, but in order to get through this to that idea of things,
Yeah.
I looked through, for instance, Aleister Crowley, all these people who made a fucking mathematical equation of it. And they all keep coming back to the same questions. At the end of the day, none of the questions are answered by all these steps. And so then it seems that the ritual itself seems to serve no purpose except for that of the practitioner. Kind of like a cathartic sense, right? Now I have most my altar, quote unquote, is more totems. You know what I'm saying? Things that hold a significance to me.
Yeah. Your altar is the totems, and mine is the physical.
Yeah, I to me it's about anything. It has a significance to me because any spirits out there haven't given me any direct instructions, and I'll be damned. The what? Yeah, there's dog food in the whatchamacallit. Hold on, guys. It's entertainment.
Well, I have to apparently entertain y'all because we're going on an adventure. So we're just gonna talk about how Friday at work, I was not prepared for the power to go out, and it was great. It was fantastic. It was like 30 minutes before the shift ended, and thank God I had actually, cleaned my grill semi. But just chilling, talking with my coworkers, and then lights start to flicker. I'm like, oh no, not this bullshit again. Oh, and here comes my husband, back and better than ever.
Yeah,
like a microwavable pancake.
Yeah, he didn't know where the box of dog food was.
Oh Lord, oh Lord.
So, and also in Gnosticism, you start to see there's a concept of a male and a female, like deity, right?
Yeah. Where I have a mix of deities.
You have like the aeons, Aeons, which are kind of like various different aspects of the superior god, right? And that one is instead of so much being male, the earliest ones is kind of hermaphroditic.
Yeah, because they carried both aspects.
Yeah, and like they use different aspects for it, and their female aspect was named Sophia, which is Greek for wisdom. Refers to when there's always this talk of Christ and the bride. Sophia is this bride.
Okay.
So yeah, and usually in anything dealing with like life and like the soul, usually in Gnosticism goes back to the Sophia. Um, in the myth, so in their myth, most, and if not all, most of the versions of the Gnostic myth, Sophia births the demiurge, who in turn brings about the creation of materiality. So she's like Yahweh's mother.
Okay.
Right, and you gotta think she's not so much of a physical being as like a concept, right?
Yes.
Um, so yeah, basically, that is there's a lot to get into with Gnosticism, but that basically we're going to get more into it gives us where we're going.
Yeah. This is start.
Right, and you're seeing how complicated it is already.
Yes.
Right.
I'm already semi-confused, but I can kind of keep myself on track.
And so yeah, basically you have Kabbalah, which gives birth to different schools of thought in Gnosticism, and then they kind of remingle back together and create what is called like Hermetic Kabbalah. Is the base?
I feel like I'm playing Skyrim listening to you.
Why?
Because I feel like I'm picking my character, and I'm at a point where it's like, oh, you can study a different school of knowledge. You can be a werewolf. You can be a vampire. You can be all these different things. What the heck is happening in my world? And oh, by the way, you can do this too on this little side quest. What's happening?
You know who a famous practitioner of Kabbalah is?
No.
Madonna.
Oh, well, that would track, though, because of how she is as a person. That really would track. That does not surprise me in the least. Like,
yeah?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Like, she's a beautiful human being. She's created some amazing stuff, and just how she lives her life and how she carries herself, that really does not surprise me. Like, it can be a little left field sometimes, but she carries herself in a very strong and she knows what she's thinking kind of way. At least that's how I see it.
Okay. So we'll get to another interesting belief of Kabbalah.
Cobblers?
Yeah, we're going back to Kabbalah.
What kind of cobbler? Is it apple?
Kabbalah thought
Is it peach?
had this notion that God enacted creation through the Hebrew language. Right?
Okay.
Basically, when God said, "Let there be light," it was the Hebrew language that did that, right? And throughout the Torah into this full linguistic mysticism thing, every Hebrew letter, word, or number, even accents on words of the Hebrew Bible, contain Jewish mystical meanings, describing the spiritual dimensions within their ideas, and teaches methods of interpretation for ascertaining these meanings. Names of God in Judaism have further provenance, though infinite meaning turns the whole Torah into a divine name.
So reading the Torah start to finish is a divine name?
The whole thing. And then it is broken down into like fractals, smaller names. Like
So names within nameception, if you would?
Kind of, yeah. If you'd ever seen the movie, have you ever seen the movie Pi? It's an early Darren Aronofsky movie. It's black and white.
No.
About this guy into numerology. Yeah, and it goes into like fractals and the Fibonacci sequence and.
Wow.
Yeah, oh boy.
That's already terrifying.
And the Fibonacci sequence, it goes back. It traces back to this thing of thought. Do you remember hearing about the Bible code?
I know of.
So yes. The Bible code comes from this, where they take they take the Bible and they bring everything back to Hebrew and they remove all the spaces and everything becomes a number, and then they start looking at it diagonally in different directions and get like different words and meanings. Supposedly, They predicted Hitler. They predicted 9/11. More and with slightly more accuracy than Nostradamus.
Huh.
But the thing is, you don't know what these things are until after they've happened, right? So you can't really predict it.
It's there, but can you read it?
Yeah.
You know what I'm,
World Trade Center airplanes means nothing until it's happened, and then you're like, oh, that's what they meant, right? So it's all these names, like the Hebrew name of this is like a channel of life force, parallel to what's called the Sephiroth.
Sephiroth?
Yep. Oh, this is Sephiroth. Let me see what they have up here about
Long silver hair?
No, that is the Sephiroth.
That is also that is 1, 2, 3.
10.
Yeah, that's 10. That is a card layout for tarot.
Well, actually
right?
11, but yeah, but that one doesn't actually count.
That's if you want to see. That's
that one. Yeah, that's the ultimate god, right?
Yeah, that layout is.
All right. So I've
done that.
What I'm looking at is basically you've seen it. Like a lot of people call it like the tree of knowledge and shit like that, but it's like 11 globes.
Sad. He's groaning.
He's getting ready for dinner. He's dinner ready.
He wants to see his friends.
Well,
he can't see his friends.
One's good for you. Oh boy, what happened to my screen here?
What did you do?
I don't know. Oh, there we go. Everything's back. All right.
It had a buffer.
Yeah. So the Sephiroth is basically.
I can't unsee it.
It's hard. Well, there's a reason. Aleister Crowley is the reason there is a tarot layout based on Sephiroth. It's basically a manifestation of the tree of life and knowledge, their anthropocentric correspondence in man. Like where all these different globes, you have like thought, memory, heart, kind of like the chakras.
Yes.
But on a much broader scale that connects you to the divine.
Yes.
And I guess that's the basic way to do it.
I'd have to
the best way to explain it. And each of these sections are broken down into subsections.
It's like I'd have to get my book to actually tell you what the spreads mean. I don't remember.
Yeah, they also represent the different aspects of the divine entity. Yeah.
It's a lot.
And why did I get into the Sephiroth?
I don't know. I'm just along for the ride and asking questions.
Oh boy.
Because I don't know.
So I mean, the long and short of it is that they took Judaism is already a complex religion, and they made it harder.
So
they made it cool, but they made it harder. Yeah, remember this is before Atari and Nintendo. All they had to do was think about shit. And every single thing in the Hebrew language can be, every single character in its written language can be something else. And it gives them layer upon layer upon layer of like meanings. And the thing is, if they had started doing this and not been finding what they were looking for, it does. Yeah. There is some credence to it. Like when you break it down into those basic things, it's like, yeah, maybe some of it's seeing what you want to see, but not all of it. There's too much mathematical reasoning to it.
Yeah. It's too coincidental.
Yeah, it's more than coincidental. It's like whoever wrote the Torah, specifically, wrote this in.
Okay.
And wrote it in all these layers that are woven together in this like deep, complicated manner. So now we have a base from which further occultism will take off, because they didn't find the answers they were looking for.
Like, dang it.
And that's what we're going to pick up next week. We will be talking next week about the Rosicrucians, the Templars.
No, we're doing the DeFeo.
Oh, well, the next time we do occult, we'll talk about we're going to talk about
you lied. You're lying
the
to
week
them.
after next. Something like that.
The who's it, what's
When we pick back up with the occult series, we're going to be talking about the Knights Templar, maybe some of the early days of the founding of Christianity. And we're going to also be talking about how the Rosicrucians, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and then we will finally begin to touch on the most wicked man in the world, Aleister Crowley.
Oh.
Mr. Crowley!
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you tune back in next week for our discussion of the Amityville Horror. We will mainly be discussing the DeFeo murders, but you cannot discuss the DeFeo murders without talking about the Lutz incidents.
Yeah, there's a little too much in common.
So, yeah.
Till next time, guys.
I've been Richard.
I'm Jessica.
And this has been Charlie Manson's Anytime.